But let's continue on here breaking down this interview that Patrik Allvin did with Iain MacIntyre. Okay, this one, we wrote an article about this at Canucks Army. Patrik Allvin talking about being aggressive at the trade deadline. I think, Harman, given what you and I have talked about recently, this is the answer you want to hear. IMAC asked, with your team obviously having a chance to win, will you be aggressive ahead of the deadline? Allvin said, well, I think I owe it to the players. The players dictate how good we are and how they're buying into the way we want to play. We know that they are capable of playing at this high level, and if they continue to do that, then it's on me to make sure I support them and give them opportunities to be successful. I love that quote. And again, I know it's not anyone else, but I really like this comment from Nick P in the YouTube live chat. He said, what will cause more drama in this market? Giving up assets to go all in and then failing in the playoffs, or not adding anyone and regretting not adding the extra pieces? I know I can only speak for myself, but based on what I've been saying recently, and just this is how I feel about this team at this point, is I would only be upset if this team didn't add. If this team adds and fails in the playoffs, it happened, right? Like if they add big time and it looks like it's a great move, and most of the moves they've been making, when they make their move, when they strike, they've been good so far. So I can't see that. One, I can't see them making a move that makes any of us go, oh, that's the wrong piece to add, right? Like maybe the critique would be you didn't add enough, but if they give it their best shot, and I already spoke about going all in yesterday, so I'm not going to do it again. But if they add and then fail in the playoffs, I'm not going to be blaming management for that. Are you?
I think the only way would be if they sold the farm essentially on a rental that they're not able to keep. I think that would sting. Sure. If it's a short playoff run, you're losing this guy. And then as you're looking at a scenario where Pettersson and Hronek are going to be more expensive, you've got a bunch of other expiring contracts, then you may regret not having those assets to go out and trade for other pieces that might help the roster moving forward. That's the only scenario where I think sort of going all in would warrant potential criticism from the market.
Sure, but what do you mean by selling the farm, right?
Like
go on.
I guess if you give up, let's say, a first round pick and like and one of your, let's say, top 3 or 4 prospects, and it's for a guy who doesn't move the needle, is a poor fit, let's say, down the stretch in the regular season in the playoffs, and you get bounced early. Like that's a move that didn't work out clearly. That would draw some criticism. It would.
Sure. But I don't think that was the question. And I don't want to dive into one question from a listener too much, but like I'm looking at it as they add, and then despite the ad being a good one, they fail in the playoffs. If it's a miss on pro scouting, then yeah, they're going to get criticized for that. But I don't think if you go out and get somebody that helps your team, but they still come up short in the playoffs, I don't think they're going to get criticized for that. At least they shouldn't, in my mind.
This is Canucks Twitter, man. Don't underestimate this fan base.
Fair enough.
There are always people on both sides.
That's very valid. Let's get to this next quote. It's from Allvin talking about Andrei Kuzmenko in relation to the trade deadline a little bit. I know we touched on it briefly yesterday, but here is the full quote, and there's a few full quotes here from Patrik Allvin. Can we get this up, Grady? There it is. Okay. Nope. Almost. Other one, Kuzmenko. Okay, one sec. I'll pull it up on my computer. Okay, so bear with us, folks. This one from Sportsnet. How concerned are you about Kuzmenko's struggles this season and that a $5.5 million player has been a healthy scratch 5 times? Allvin said, if you look at it, he's a second-year pro in the National Hockey League. Although he's older, we know the second year is tough. We've become a better team and we want to play a more structured game. I would say I'm very pleased with his last few games. I think Kuzi understands what he needs to do in order to stay in the lineup. IMAC asked again, have other teams been calling you about him? Allvin, obviously, he's a hell of a talented player, and teams are definitely checking in when they see a guy like that is not in the lineup. Is what to do with Kuzmenko the biggest decision you have to make before the March 8th trade deadline? Allvin, the players usually dictate where they fit and how they perform and all that. Tocchet is a puzzle guy, and we want to make sure the puzzle works. So we talk about different ideas and things, and then we'll see where things go. Arguably the most interesting quotes from the story, Harman. Not shutting the door on a Kuzmenko trade, but also not shutting the door on what Jim Rutherford a few months ago called their preference, and that is that Andrei Kuzmenko figures it out and plays well, and Allvin's happy with his last few games. Arguably the most interesting quote from all of this.
Yeah, and I think as you look at this Kuzmenko situation, it is going to be interesting to see if you're going to go out and acquire top six forward, are there ways to add that piece cap wise without sending a contract back? Because that might be the scenario where you may just have to include Kuzmenko to be able to afford a bigger salary. I'm not sure what cap gymnastics are available to them, but right now, according to Cap Friendly, they're projected to have 1.2 million in deadline cap space. And now there are creative ways to get around it. We've seen teams at previous deadlines, the whole third-party broker became a buzzword where you double retain, and now all of a sudden the guy's cap hit is shrinking a ton, and maybe you run with fewer than 23 players on your roster, which frees up a little bit more flexibility, and you're able to add that piece without sending a bigger salary like Kuzmenko back. But I think that's one of the biggest questions that comes to mind for me initially, is not just about the merits of Kuzmenko and his individual fit, but clearly you want to add to this team. Can you do that without sending a contract back? I think that's going to be something to watch for. And then if it's not at this deadline, unless there's a dramatic turnaround, you figure there has to be a resolution in the offseason, because with some of these contracts that the Canucks are going to have to sign, some of these rising costs, expiring free agents, having to plug in holes, you can't really afford to have $5.5 million that is not being put to is not being maximized in its usage. Every dollar counts for the Canucks, and I think that would be the type of contract that you might look at and go, all right, we want to find a better way to make use of this capital.
I like it. The whole Anthony Beauvillier from the Islanders. This final quote, Harman, from this interview as we wrap up this segment here. It's the one that's got the market up in arms. Patrik Allvin on Elias Pettersson. Is there any change in Elias Pettersson's situation? Any signs of negotiations resuming? Allvin, I have conversations with his agent, but nothing obviously has changed. We want to keep Petey here. He knows that at some point it's going to come down to negotiations and if it's working or not. We have another year with him as an RFA. We're not going to lose him this summer. But that being said, I'm trying to plan for our team this year and next year, and I want him to be a big part of it. IMAC followed that up by asking if it, in Allvin's experience, it was a little unusual for a star player to kind of hold off like this. And Patrik Allvin said, yeah, maybe a little bit. Called it a little bit unusual. And I think that quote is the one that really has the market discussing. Like, I've seen people say, like, okay, well, if you have to trade Elias Pettersson, what do you want to get back for him? And I'm like, come on, it's way too soon for that. And your colleague, Thomas Drance, had a really, really sharp column, I thought, in The Athletic about why it's not time to worry about Elias Pettersson's contract with the Vancouver Canucks. And I think both of us kind of share that sentiment as well. And you brought up a name in David Pastrnak that is kind of relevant to this situation as well.
Yeah, I've consistently brought it up even this past summer when everybody, before Pettersson had done that interview with Friedman, said that he wanted to wait till the end of the season to negotiate and really sign his next contract, that if you look at Pastrnak, who was also repped by JP Barry of CAA, their playbook was really interesting. And I think Pastrnak gained a lot from that situation. And basically the timeline for that was on July 1st, not last offseason, the offseason before, in 2022, the Bruins tried to sit down with Pastrnak and they wanted to hammer out a long-term extension right away. Pastrnak wasn't willing to do it. And I think part of it was wanting to see what the future of the team looked like with Bergeron, with Krejci. It was definitely, it looked like it could be a transitory stage in the Bruins timeline. And okay, are we going to be a good team? So those negotiations were sort of put on hold. Boston got off to this terrific start in the middle of a historic regular season, sort of like the excellent start the Canucks are off to right now. And Pastrnak continued slow playing it, and he didn't put pen to paper until right before the trade deadline. And keep in mind, there was even more urgency with the situation because Pastrnak was an unrestricted free agent. So he was only months away from literally being able to walk. And that worked to Pasternak's advantage because that gave him an opportunity to put up even bigger numbers. The more favorable cap comparables came in, and he got a very clear direction of, okay, the future in Boston, at least in the short term, is still pretty bright. I can feel comfortable about committing here. And from Pettersson's situation, he's made it very clear since that interview with Friedman that he wanted to wait till the end of the season. And why would you not? First of all, he gains so much information by waiting through this season about the direction of the organization, his confidence in the coaching staff, management. These are his prime years. This is arguably his most important window the next few years in terms of the next contract. Why would he not take as much time to make an informed decision, especially when he's an RFA? Second, and this is the part that I don't think a lot of people are maybe looking at as much, is last offseason, Pettersson's negotiating power probably wasn't quite as strong because he'd only been a 100-point player once in his career.
Yep.
Keep in mind that before that, Pettersson had never been a point-per-game player. So him going out and doing it again and potentially being in the Selke conversation, I saw Jay Fresh did a poll of NHL fans, and Barkov was second, or Pettersson was second in Selke trophy voting behind Barkov. If you're a centerman that can put up back-to-back 100-point seasons, and you're potentially going to be a runner-up in the Selke conversation, being able to put together a second elite season that helps him individually in terms of his leverage, his contract, and what he can command. And then third, you see more favorable comparables like Nylander rolling in. And so given all that, why would he rush to make this decision? So I'm not worried about this situation at all because throughout this entire process, it's made sense for him to wait.
Canucks Conversation with Harmon and Quads every weekday at 2 p.m. Be sure to check it out on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. And if you missed it, go check it out on your favorite podcast catcher app.